Hello and welcome to a very special round table. On 31st October, over 100 world leaders, including Prime Minister Narendra Modi, are coming together in Glasgow for the COP26 summit on climate change. It's being described as perhaps the most critical summit of our times, one that could shape our collective future. How serious is the challenge of the climate emergency, of global warming? Why should you and I be concerned? What really are the solutions? That's what we're going to discuss today with a stellar panel of experts, policymakers, and some of the world's finest global voices. But before we discuss the challenges and solutions, let's get a sense of what the core issue at the moment in the climate change battle is. Take a look.
Devastating floods in Kerala. A deadly cloudburst that submerged parts of Uttarakhand. And a deluge that swept Gujarat, Rajasthan and Maharashtra this year. These natural disasters in the span of 10 months exhibit the disastrous consequences of climate change that are weighing heavy on India. Not just India, the whole world is feeling the heat. The floods that caught Europe by surprise are proof. Mother Earth is burning. The UN climate body, Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, has already declared code red for humanity. World leaders are assembling to discuss the 21st century biggest challenge for mankind. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has reached Rome for G20 summit with a focus on climate change. The discussion on climate change will likely include phasing out global coal resources, limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, need to curb greenhouse gases, and end subsidies on fossil fuel. Soon, after the two-day summit in Rome, world leaders will touch down in Glasgow for the COP26 summit. An event will be attended by heads of state and government of more than 120 countries. India, led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, is set to make the climate justice for climate change the centerpiece of COP26. India's war cry for the battle against climate change will include the claims of the developing world that its developed counterparts have been shifting their goalposts in the various rounds of talks, right from Kyoto Protocol to Paris Agreement. COP26 will provide an opportunity for all the stakeholders, including leaders of partner countries, innovators and intergovernmental organizations, to meet and explore the possibilities for further accelerating the world's clean growth. Bureau Report, India Today.
So how serious is the climate emergency that confronts India and the world? My first guest is Maharashtra's Environment Minister, who's been raising this issue at different platforms. Aaditya Thackeray joins me. Appreciate your joining us, Aditya. When one says there is a climate emergency facing India and the world, is one being alarmist in your view? Or is it that the political class and many citizens have simply not realized the gravity of the situation? Do you agree there is a climate emergency that faces India and the world?
Yes, I agree on two things with everyone who's seeing this. One is, of course, there is a climate emergency. We're in the midst of it. And two, the time to act is now, if not yesterday. If you look at events around the world, be it what happened in Seattle a couple of months ago, or Australia, or even Germany with the flash floods, or UK, closer back home in Uttarakhand or Kerala, or even in Maharashtra. These are not anomalies anymore. These are not erratic weather patterns. There is a certain pattern to this, and this is climate change. Mumbai itself as a city, and both of us talk about it whenever there's heavy monsoon. But for the last 3 years, individually, we faced more than 3,000 mm of rain per year. Now, that is a huge amount of rain for the city of Mumbai. Another part is, you've also been a Mumbaiker for most of your life. You know that this was always the good bay and always a safe harbor for boats. But in the 11 months that we've seen in the last, 1 year, We faced 3 cyclones, be it in Raigad, be it in Konkan, be it in Mumbai. That was never the case for the past 100 years. So we surely are in the middle of a climate emergency.
You know, you mentioned Mumbai more than once there, and in a way it brings me to my next question, which is that many experts feel, Aditya, that Mumbai is at the heart now of India's climate change challenge, one of the most vulnerable cities in the world to climate change, to rising sea levels. But at the same time, we continue to see construction, untrammeled construction along some of the eco-sensitive coastal areas of Mumbai, indeed Maharashtra's coast, India's coast. I just wonder, this challenge, is it simply how easy is it to walk the talk? The real challenge seems to be to actually stop the kind of development that cities like Mumbai have seen over the last few decades, much of which with the Shiv Sena in power in the BMC, that we actually recognize the need for eco-sensitive development, sustainable development.
No, there are 2 aspects to this, and I would like to put both really clearly in front of the people, because it's about time that we start talking about climate changes and how do we tackle with it. One is, of course, yes, we talk about Mumbai as being in the heart of climate change emergency, but nonetheless, if you see, the rest of India also faces an equal danger. Mumbai is spoken about a lot because it is the financial capital and the industrial powerhouse of India. But if you see what's happening in Konkan or in Uttarakhand or Kerala, you're going to see a huge amount of migration because of climate change emergencies, be it floods, be it famines, be it droughts, be it landslides, hailstorms. That is one. The other aspect is largely India is still agrarian and an agrarian economy. Most of us depend on our farmers for food, naturally so. But with what is happening in terms of unseasonal rainfall, extended rainfall, hailstorms, droughts, this pattern is going to change. So our food habits, our farming habits need to adapt to what climate change is, and we need to give a deeper thought to this. Thirdly, let me tell you that we need to step beyond panic environmentalism to environmentalism backed by science and climate science. Here is where I feel that there are 2 aspects to this. One is anything that is just development is going to lead to climate change and climate change emergencies, where we are blindly hacking down trees, going into jungles, probably looking at not having environmental impact assessment for railway roads or highways, going into forests. But wherever there is sustainable development, that is why climate change mitigation and adaptation happens. Let me give you a simple example of Mumbai itself, since we're speaking of Mumbai. Normally we think of tall buildings or housing complex as development, and we think that, okay, this has destroyed the environment. Recently, we did a heat mapping survey and a contour survey of Mumbai with WRI and C40 cities. What we realized is wherever we have planned housing complexes or buildings, they have their own stormwater drains, they have their own sewage treatment plants, they have a certain amount of greenery around them. And these areas are actually relatively cooler than when you see informal homes like slums in Dharavi or any other places of Mumbai. Now, typically here, if we have to build homes for the people and move them from informal homes to formal homes, this would be called as development, and probably we would panic as, okay, this is against climate change. But really, we need development and sustainable development to battle climate change and adapt and mitigate climate change. I think that is the balance we need to strike between our actions and its impact on the planet.
But that is the question. How do you strike that balance? For example, the coastal road project in Mumbai, which many environmentalists claim is not environmentally friendly. They say that the environment impact assessment is not correct. On the other hand, there are those who say that this is the only way to ensure that traffic congestion is reduced in maximum city. There are fisher folks who may have objections to a coastal road because it might change their lifestyle. I'm just trying to wonder, how does one navigate through these various stakeholders? How do you ensure in the future that construction is legal, that we don't have illegal constructions along the coastline? Can an Aaditya Thackeray really tell me that he can ensure that you can be tough when there are coastal zone violations taking place?
Absolutely. We need to be strict on the CRZ violations. We need to be strict on anyone going into mangroves. With the coastal road, if you see most of the coastline that's coming up along the coastal road, it's actually not a natural coastline. It was always reclaimed as for the city of Mumbai. You had tetrapods in that place. And the coastal road really is going to be a carbon neutral road, and that is what we're planning. We're getting 96 hectares of green open space that cannot be touched ever. You cannot have buildings built on that. It will be a carbon sink for the city with the urban forest that we're planning. We're looking at people who will be able to walk or cycle from Worli to Nepean Sea Road. Going beyond that, we're also looking at rainwater percolation and harvesting tanks. And if you see the sea walls of the coastal road, you've already got the crustaceans back in that. You've got an ecosystem living back in the newly built seawall for the coastal road. So that is one of the things. We are also solarizing the coastal road, generating solar energy from that. Not just the coastal road. I'll give you another example of the MTHL, which is on the east coast, the Trans-Harbour Link. Now that, if you come with me along in April, the construction work is going on. The construction footprint is quite measured. And even last April, when I went there, you had the flamingos come in there and nest around where the MTHL work is going on. So for us, as a government that is balancing it out, we're keen to protect the environment along with sustainable development.
May I intervene though here, Aaditya Thackeray, because it's good to have a politician talking seriously about the environment, but I wonder whether this is the younger generation, Aaditya Thackeray, an environment minister, versus an older political leadership across the spectrum, which doesn't have the same level of ecological sensitivity that you are voicing today. And is that going to be a fundamental conflict in ensuring that climate change is put at the top of a political agenda?
For us as government of Maharashtra, thankfully, the Chief Minister himself is a wildlife enthusiast, a conservation expert and passionist, and he believes in conservation. If you see in the last 2 years, the decisions that we've taken, 10 conservation reserves, Tilari Conservation Reserve, 2 new sanctuaries, 9,800 hectares of mangroves in protection in one shot, 808 acres of RA in a city like Mumbai, diverting to railroads and stopping some mining in the heart of the forest. I think these are some of the things that we've been able to do. And going ahead, we're going to be strict with our environmental norms.
But, let me ask you, COP26 is going to capture a lot of the headlines in the next week. If you were there in Glasgow, you had to give 2 immediate solutions to ensure that in the next decade at least, there is far greater consciousness in this country at least about the climate emergency. What would your 2 solutions be that you would like to offer today?
So we've committed as Maharashtra state to the race to zero, and we're looking at net zero carbon emissions in the very near future. We've got 43 cities committing to race to zero. That is almost the population of France. Now, why we did this is basically when we looked at our actions in terms of as a government, as urban local bodies, saying or not saying, we're moving towards net zero. We're doing a greenhouse gas inventory of all these cities. Now, the 2 biggest factors for India where we need to decarbonize rapidly, one is transport and largely public transport, and 2, energy. Now, if we can move away from the conventional sources of energy, naming coal, and move towards renewable, which is what the Prime Minister also is speaking about, be it hydrogen or solar, I think that would be a huge leap for us as a country. And 2, if we can move towards electric mobility powered by renewable energy, I think that is something which will give us a frog jump effect in terms of decarbonizing and moving towards net zero.
Aaditya Thackeray, Maharashtra's Environment Minister, for joining us here on the Climate Change Roundtable, sharing your thoughts and perhaps, in a way, revealing that there are different sides to politicians, particularly the younger generation politicians conscious of climate change. Thank you very much for joining me here on this special roundtable. So the Maharashtra